Hi, thank you very much for all the information and all the data. This, I think, is a question to BRE, but I'd be interested in the other views. The level of quality control that essentially you're talking about, both in terms of your documentation and controls on site, are we essentially talking about bringing clerks of works back into projects, or it sounds very similar to the approach in Passive House, for example, and how performance is actually delivered.
Thanks, Julie. Nice, easy one. The short answer is I don't think we know yet. I think, as I alluded to, on our first project, I think we're being pretty heavy-handed and pretty better safe than sorry. And I hope as we become more confident, and realistically as our supply chain becomes more confident, we can be less, not less meticulous, but less, less meticulous. Not more sloppy, but initially, we are being very, very over the top, because that's the nature of new things.
Okay, so the next question was from...
Hi, I'm Jamie from Landmark Information Group. This is a question for Roy. I would have thought CO2 measurement would have been part of the well standard. I was surprised it wasn't, because it's such an easy thing to measure.
Yeah, I think they're relying on you having the sensors installed for automatic monitoring and interpreting that data on an ongoing basis. It's not part of the minimum requirement for well. It's not part of the indoor air quality measurements. But as I said, it's a free test to do, so it's a no-brainer to include it.
Okay, any other questions out there? We've got one question over here. Just whilst that microphone's come to you, in terms of product suppliers, have we got product suppliers in the room? I noticed there was one person from Saint-Gobain. You're a product supplier. Where are you seeing a response through innovation and new products coming to the market around both products that are reducing VOCs, for example, or Ed, for you in biophilia, in terms of, where do people go to get information about products that might well be, better or more compliant to this whole agenda?
Shall I? There are a number of green product guides out there. On one of my other presentations, I put a little slide up saying where you can get it. But yeah, they're available on the internet, and they're constantly changing. So they're constantly having products added to them.
What I would add is, I think ultimately helpfully, but we find that products understandably don't want to put on their product data sheet this is well compliant or this is BREEAM compliant, because there's a number of schemes and they may say it one day and then it's not true the next day. So understandably they avoid making that statement, which is sensible, but ultimately it makes it difficult for architects or subcontractors who are trying to quickly establish whether a product is compliant to read there's a limit and then check the testing standard it's been tested against, and ultimately makes it a hell of a lot more complicated. But equally I can see why they've done it that way, and I don't know what the answer to that is.
Yeah, just to pick that up, I think it is a complex issue, because it's all about effectively the technical qualities of materials and then how that data is picked up and interpreted in a much wider sphere of health and well-being in interiors. And I think as well, I spoke about biophilia, but a lot of those material qualities are completely overarching all these areas that we're talking about, how things interact with light, what's being emitted from them, what do they look like. And there are green listing databases. Some of them are quite reasonable. Some are still a bit incomplete in terms of the qualities that they do put out there. But it's a bit of a tricky job. But it's a great way. Health and Wellbeing is providing a great feedback loop to those product innovators, which is quite interesting. So I'm certainly seeing in product manufacturing innovations changing now that will deliver better starting products to go into healthier and better buildings.
So with that alignment that we saw between BRE and the well standard, and the fact that the BRE run the green guide, are you saying, is that one place that one could go and find products that would also demonstrate or show some degree of compatibility to the well standard?
It's not really compatibility. I mean, there are other the green guide system is being phased out, but there are other listing systems for, if you think about this technical health and safety issues of every material on the planet, there's that. There's sustainability requirements.
Or an environmental product declaration.
Exactly. There are so many different responsible sourcing. There are so many different categories and it's about bringing all those into a single point place. And there are some that are starting to do that.
Okay, and you're seeing innovation coming through from product
Definitely
suppliers?
Innovation coming from suppliers, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Over to you, sir.
Thanks. Just to add, really interesting, and you looked more the psychological side of biophilia. What about in your research, you're going to be looking at air quality, so absorption of things like VOCs, production of oxygen, and do you need a whole forest to make that happen? Or I think that's what I find quite challenging.
Yeah. Great question. Yes, we are looking at that. I think, and again, it refers to this point that actually a single issue or opportunity like biophilia isn't sort of single deliverable. I think probably its primary manifestation is in psychological, and then there are various claims, some of which we're actually involved in rigorous testing now, of particular green wall systems which claim to be producing more oxygen within the environment, taking CO2 out. Strikes me as a little bit illogical, because I would think the plants would just be putting on huge amounts of mass then and filling your room with ever-growing plants, whereas actually you probably want a steady state. And the other one is particulates, about removing particulates from air. But these things need to be looked at a bit more deeply and tested, because in theory you've got three different elements there that single unit could be doing.
Is that going to be part of your research?
Yes, it is. So we're monitoring the whole building indoor air environment as well as the people. Yeah, absolutely.
So what's happening internationally? I mean, so the well standard has originated from the US. There's been a lot of evidence which goes into the different criteria around setting the standard, etc. You mentioned in your presentation, Ned, examples from Japan and other places. I mean, who's leading, and how are we collaborating with others so that you're not starting from scratch in this research?
Yeah, so the research absolutely mustn't start from scratch. I'm a great advocate of effective study reviews before we set off down any pathway. And it is to build upon things like the great World Green Building Council report from 2014. It is about looking at the well standard and how that sort of overlaps into this territory. And I repeat back a phrase from one of our core partners in this current project, is that they find it really challenging having to dig out a research paper from Canada or from Japan to try and persuade people why they should be doing things or investing in technologies that have a positive health and well-being benefit. So I think there's great power, and that's part of our ambition, in putting forward a UK or European evidence base around some of these facets.
Great, okay, we look forward to the outcomes on that. So we've got some questions in the audience. There's a lady right in the far corner over there in the middle who's not spoken before, so can we get a mic to her? So please remember just to say your name and your organisation. There we go. And then there's... Perfect. Just so as I know, and we have one over there. Have you got any other questions coming from around here? No one from the centre today for this session. Interesting. Gone quiet. Okay.
Hi, my name is Yasmina Mikael from RES Long & Partners. I had a question for Ed. It ties into overlaps and not having to start from scratch. A lot of what you said in biophilic design had to do with texture and light, acoustics, and all those sensory aspects. I was wondering whether there's a linkage with mental health and specifically autism, for example, where a lot of these aspects are accentuated. And I guess helping people with things like autism in general requires this changes in the sensory environment, which align completely with biophilic design.
That's a really excellent question, which I don't actually know the answer to, but I think you're right. In parallel to this, we're actually refurbishing one of our homes on the BRE site as a design for dementia home, and I'm certainly aware that the environmental conditions, i.e. what's on the floor, what colour is it, what zoning is within those buildings, is hugely assistive in slowing down the early onset dementia and helping people stay in their homes for longer. I'm not so sure about autism, but maybe absolutely there are elements in there that can help that.
Thank you.
Okay, so we had a... You still want to ask your question?
It's just very brief.
Just wait for the microphone, because I think it helps with the filming.
So it's Paul Edgeboy again from CTEC. It was just very briefly to pick up on what Ed was saying about collaborative research. I just wondered whether you were familiar with the Neighbours rating scheme.
Yep.
Do you want to say a bit more about that, perhaps?
Well, I do and I don't. There are certain elements within, and again, I reflect on the core partners that we're starting to work with. Many of those, whether it's a flooring partner, wall coverings, lighting, whoever, they've clearly done a lot of research in this space already. But typically what I've encountered is that they have conducted research pretty much in isolation around their product and system. So when you start sort of putting circadian lighting in with different flooring products, it starts to become quite interesting about the whole office. But yeah, we're absolutely keen to, if there aren't things that we don't know, programs out there, we want to link into those and share, to pick up Paul's point about we're very transparent about the evidence that comes from these studies so that people can start putting things into practice.
Just to pick up briefly on I've read some of that research, and then actually I think it's worth flagging up some of the research we saw this morning, which was really interesting and extremely encouraging. But I think we need to just be conscious that there's a lot of research happening, not necessarily to I made a joke earlier, but to peer-reviewed academic standards. So most of these studies, as far as I can see, aren't taking into account things like the Hawthorne effect, which you may or may not be familiar with. Sorry, very briefly, does anyone know what the Hawthorne effect is? So, without wanting to pick on CBRE earlier, because it was a fantastic bit of research, but you've got a test case and you do a change case and you see the improvement, but the Hawthorne effect is essentially that change, you'll get an improvement, change something, you get an improvement. So you need another test case where you change something loose and equivalent and seeing if the change is a real improvement or if it's artificial because you've implanted a change. And a lot of the research going on in this area just does a change and says, there's an improvement, but doesn't measure whether that's a true improvement or just changing something. And we just need to be a bit conscious of that.
Absolutely. It's almost like, people behave differently when they're watched. It's that kind of principle. The other point that was made, I can't remember who made it earlier today, was about the permanency of the change as well. Because actually that entry-level refurbishment I had on my slide, people will probably feel quite good about it for about a month, and then they'll forget. So the permanency of any effect is really, really interesting, and how you can sort of revitalise things, a year or two down the line. Very interesting.
Great. Okay. So I'm sure we all need some refreshment now. And so what I'd like to do is, first of all, can I make maybe a request from you, Roy? You mentioned that there were normally a slide that would, signpost people to the areas where they can find information about products. Could you add that to your presentation so when it does go live and we've all got a copy of it, then at least it's there, if that might be of help for people. And so let's just say thank you. Thank you to the panel.